Good afternoon. This is Jeff with Sewer Tech Northwest. Today we are at 9222 North Fortune Avenue. We're located up on the rooftop, going down through a 4-inch cast iron vent. We're going to check the overall condition and serviceability of the sanitary sewer line. Water is currently running, and we'll zero the foot counter out once we get down to the base of the vent stack here. Alright, we are now under the house. Usually we're under the dirt anyway on this era of home. Off we go. That's some nice, healthy looking cast iron right there so far. Almost no scale to speak of. Very clean pipe. Cast iron from this era is a very solid pipe product. It holds up a very long time. You advance forward about 20 years beyond the era of this house and the cast iron does not hold up anywhere near as well. We're swapping over to 6-inch concrete pipe there. We're generally speaking from this era of house. Once you get about 5 feet outside the foundation wall is where the transition to concrete typically takes place. I'm sorry for all the lines on my screen here. I'm not sure if I got a loose connection on my camera somewhere. Alright, there's our main lateral connection. Sorry, I was trying to go extra slow there. Keep the glitchies off the screen. Hit the main here at 70 feet. We're going to go locate that really quick here while the pipe drains out, and we'll take another look at everything as we come back in. The line has great slope and grade to it. It looks great. The stuff I'm most concerned about right now is the concrete pipe. The concrete pipe is clean. Slope and grade through it looks fantastic. What I'm mostly concerned about is just the condition of the concrete material itself. You know, when concrete gets near the end of its lifespan, one of the things that starts to occur is that you expose a lot of heavy, rough aggregate rock. We'll see how that looks as we come back out, how much aggregate's exposed, and whether or not we have any parts of the concrete line that are exposed to the ground. Like anything, everything has a finite, existence and lifespan. Once the pipe material starts to get worn out to the point where we start seeing evidence that it's opening up to the ground, generally speaking, at that point, I recommend updates. That doesn't mean the line flow-wise is not functioning to an extent, even sometimes fairly well. And I'm often referring to this stuff as it relates to doing epoxy liners nowadays. You can do a lot of this stuff trenchlessly and take advantage of that, and usually there's quite a bit of cost savings involved when you do that. With the advent of those liners, though, you have to do them at the right time. If you let a line wear out and get too far gone, for example, if you let the joints get to the point where they're fully open to the ground and they start pulling dirt and groundwater through them, what causes is hydro erosion. It can erode the support out from around the pipe, cause the line to settle, and once you've got enough settling that's taken place, you'll lose the ability to be able to do a liner on it. One, it's hard to cure the epoxy if you get a big belly in the line. Two, you just end up with a kind of a wonky result. So anyway, we're going to see how things look as we come back here. At the very least, this looks like a fantastic candidate for that process, but we'll see how things are looking. And keep in mind, too, that not the entire line is homeowners' responsibility. A good portion of this it would fall into cities. All right, located the camera head successfully. Line terminates on North Fortune. And where it ends up hitting the main at, this is approximate, it's not dead on the money, but it's approximately pretty much straight out from the front doorway, out in the middle of the road is where the line hits the main lateral. And just for the heck of it, I try to take some depths there. It's a deep sewer line. I was getting kind of some jumpy signals, but jumping between about 8.5 feet and about 9.5 feet deep there. So now the line's all drained out, you can get a little nicer look at the pipe bottom there. So we are getting a reasonable amount of aggregate rock showing through right now, which in the short term makes for rough pipe surface that's just more prone to debris hanging up in the line. And if you do get a blockage, it's a fairly stubborn one because that rough pipe wall acts kind of like sandpaper. It really hangs on to stuff. Thus far, though, we have very little buildup to speak of in the line. So some level of aggregate does not always, necessarily mean it's time for the thing to go. What I'm also looking at are the pipe joints here as we come back. Every joint I've gone past thus far is all looking dry. And that's the thing that really kind of accelerates the deterioration of the line. Once the joints open up, what generally happens first with concrete pipe is the joints wear out. They're grouted shut. That grout is not a terribly flexible material, and after years and years of expansion, contraction of the soil, it often starts to work on those joints. Once the joints start failing, what you end up with is a big, huge, dark ring of moisture around the pipe joint. Under hydraulic pressure, when the ground gets saturated with water, especially during the rainy season, it forces water through the joint, and it's usually a fairly slow but sure process, but it eventually leads to hydro erosion. And that's what causes the line to settle. I mean, there is not a speck of buildup in that entire piece of concrete pipe. There are some joints like this one here, it's showing a little bit of wear on it, but every joint we've gone past there is bone dry. Everything's flowing through there just fine. So it's obviously concrete pipe. It's not the newest pipe in the world there, but it is clearly functioning. The clean out down on the ground down there, I'm going through the roof vent because the clean out's easy to find. The cap has never been off of that thing before. I can't even remove it because the bushings on it are blown. If you try and undo the cap right now, the whole flange spins rather than the cap. So what I'm getting at here is that no one has cleaned this thing. There's no cleaning that's been done preemptively for the sale. You're getting a natural look at how this line functions. So the big thing with older pipe materials, both cast iron and concrete both, and whether they're deteriorated or not, they have a rougher texture to them, and they're not terribly forgiving to things like paper towels, wipes, and flushable wipes. So it's something you do want to avoid. If you're newer to home ownership, I would avoid flushable wipes like the plague, especially with older lines. They snag up everywhere. I'll camera old lines like this where the households replace their flushable wipes, replace toilet paper with wipes entirely, and in a lot of cases I can't even tell you what the pipe material is because the entire line's coated in them. So keep it to folded toilet paper. But as far as flow and functionality go here, we have good flow end to end, zero buildup to speak of. If I can't recommend a few dollars in drain cleaning on the line, recommending that whole section be updated at this point does not make sense, in my opinion. But it is something to keep up with. You're going to want to rescope this line, especially if you want to be able to take advantage of an epoxy liner at some point. What I would highly recommend doing is rescoping the line every 2 years. That way you can pick and choose the right time to do the liner on this. As we sit here today, this line functions beautifully. Super clean line, it stayed completely in grade. There's not a drop of standing water anywhere in the sewer pipe. And that's the diameter of the line you're working with here, coupled with the fact that it has perfect slope and grade, is what gives you that candidate for an epoxy liner. So it's something that behooves you to keep an eye on these things, because in a lot of cases, in Portland it's a little different because the street area is generally not in homeowner responsibility. That's the really expensive stuff to deal with, but you're still having to crack a sidewalk open, trench up your front yard, and if you can get it done for half the price of digging, it's money ahead to keep an eye on it and rescope. Spend $160 every couple of years to keep an eye on things so you can avoid the fun of doing a traditional dig. But just based on, I've been doing this for 13 years. I've cambered about 25,000 sewer lines at this point. Based on the wear and tear I see on it right now, the condition of it, and its age, I would say that you should have, again, I can't predict every environmental factor out there. Root intrusions, occupancy changes how a line wears out. If you're going from 2 people to 6 people, water is what erodes concrete, just like it does your driveway. So things can accelerate that process. But, I would probably be in the back of my head planning to do a liner on this thing about, probably 5 to 7 years from now. Sometimes they go longer, sometimes they don't. That's why you want to rescope them periodically and catch those things in their infancy so you can take advantage of that repair process. Anyway, line is functioning properly at this time. That is a very nicely functioning old line right there, and absolutely spotless clean. And that is hugely comes down to the homeowners. The homeowners here have great living habits. They're not putting a drop of bacon grease or cooking oil down their sink, and I highly recommend keeping that same habit up. Grease and cooking oil are a big problem for a lot of sewer lines. A lot of households don't mind that, and they end up with thick grease buildup. But what grease does in older materials is different than new stuff. New stuff, it gacks it up, and obviously it can cause blockages. In older pipe materials that are not chemically stable, like cast iron and concrete both are, they're susceptible to acidity. And so what can happen is that grease can trap acids and things like that underneath it, and it can cause stuff to sit in places it otherwise would not. It would just keep flowing, and it can kind of prematurely wear the line out. Grease does that especially with cast iron. So I would keep the same habits up. These folks, a thin little coating of PAM spray on your pans is no big deal. Hot water soap handles that just fine. But those are some things to help kind of extend the life of these lines and keep them going longer than they otherwise would. This is a very well cared for sewer line. Whether the homeowners knew they were doing that or not, it's a combination of a well installed line